"Please don't come inside," said a single mom to the mean and lonely cowboy who wanted her love. Now let's find out what happened between them. The wind that evening had teeth. It howled across the empty Texas plains, carrying with it dust, rain, and the kind of chill that slipped right into a person's bones. Inside a small cabin at the edge of Dustwater Creek, Cassie Mayfield worked by the glow of a flickering lantern. The stew on the fire had gone cold hours ago, but she was too busy sewing patches onto her boy's worn shirt to notice. Her fingers trembled as thunder cracked outside, loud enough to shake the shutters. Little Tommy, only 8, lifted his head from the corner where he'd been drawing in the dirt. "Mama, is Pa coming home tonight?" he asked, his small voice barely a whisper. Cassie stopped sewing. Her breath caught. It had been 3 years since that question stopped being answerable. She swallowed hard and forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. It's just us now. You, me, and Annie." From the small cradle by the fire, Annie, barely 2 years old, whimpered softly. Cassie went to her, humming a tune her late husband used to play on his harmonica. The sound barely rose above the wind, but it was enough to calm the child. Then, knock, knock, knock. Cassie froze mid-song. No one ever came this far out during a storm. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and most nights, the only sound she heard was the coyotes crying across the hills. She grabbed the shotgun from beside the door and whispered, "Tommy, take your sister and stay quiet." The knocks came again, louder this time. She inched toward the door, her bare feet brushing against the rough wooden floor. "Who's there?" she called out. A deep voice answered, low and rough as gravel. "Name's Cole Hardin. Storm caught me on the ridge. Need shelter for the night." Cassie's heart thudded. That name, she'd heard it whispered in town. Cole Hardin, the ranch hand turned drifter. Folks said he had a mean streak, that he'd once put a man in the dirt over a card game gone wrong. She bit her lip, torn between fear and compassion. "Please," the man's voice came again, softer this time. "I ain't looking for trouble, ma'am. Just need a place to wait the rain out." Cassie hesitated, eyes darting toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass she saw him, a tall shadow in a drenched hat, water dripping from the brim. Lightning flashed behind him, turning his shape into a ghostly outline. "Please, don't come inside," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. There was silence for a long, uneasy moment. The storm beat against the roof, rattling the boards. Finally Cole spoke. "Reckon I'll just wait under your awning then. Don't mean to scare you." He stepped back from the door and Cassie peered through the crack. There he was, standing with his back to her, rain pouring down his coat, his horse tethered and shivering. The sight stirred something inside her, a memory of a time when strangers weren't a threat, when kindness didn't have to come with fear. She slowly opened the door. "You can come in," she said softly. "Just, don't frighten the children." Cole nodded once and stepped inside. The room felt smaller with him in it. The firelight flickered across his face, rough, unshaven but not unkind. He took off his hat, rain dripping onto the floor. "Much obliged." Cassie gestured toward the fire. "You can dry off there." He didn't speak for a while, just crouched near the flames, holding his big hands out toward the warmth. The rain crackled against the roof, and the wind screamed through the trees outside. Tommy peeked from behind the cradle, eyes wide. Cole noticed and offered the faintest of smiles. "You got brave kids." "They don't have much choice," Cassie said quietly, turning back to the pot on the stove. For a while the only sound was the rain, the fire, and the soft clatter of Cassie stirring the stew. Cole finally broke the silence. "You live out here alone?" Cassie didn't answer right away. "Since my husband passed. Been 3 winters now." He nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to the flames. "Sorry to hear it." She glanced at him from the corner of her eye. "And you? You from around here?" "No," he said, voice distant. "Ain't from much of anywhere these days." There was something heavy behind his words, something more than weariness. Regret. When the storm deepened outside, Cassie sighed and handed him a bowl of stew. "You best eat. Roads won't clear till morning." He took the bowl, his hands careful, respectful. "Thank you." Cassie sat across from him, her children sleeping beside her, and studied him in silence. The flicker of the fire caught the scar across his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes, and the way he looked, not at her, but around her, like a man afraid of breaking something fragile. When he finished, he stood, placing the bowl neatly on the table. "I'll sleep by the door," he said. "Ain't fixin' to trouble you none." Cassie nodded, clutching her shawl close. "Good night, Mr. Hardin." He gave a small nod and laid his coat down on the floorboards. Outside the storm raged. Inside, the air was heavy with warmth and a strange, quiet tension. Cassie lay awake long after the fire burned low, listening to the rain and to the slow, even breathing of the stranger sleeping by her door. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of the dark. Morning sunlight crept through the cracks in the shutters, painting golden stripes across the worn cabin floor. Cassie awoke to the sound of clinking metal and the low creak of the front door. She rose from her bedroll on the floor beside the children's cot and found Cole Hardin already awake, his coat dry now, hat back on his head. He was stacking logs beside the hearth, moving quietly so as not to wake the little ones. For a man rumored to be mean, he was surprisingly gentle in his motions. "You didn't have to do that," Cassie said softly, tying her shawl around her shoulders. Cole looked over his shoulder, his eyes catching hers for a second before flicking away. "You took me in when you didn't have to. Least I can do's make myself useful." Cassie said nothing. She poured water from a kettle into 2 cups and handed him one. His hand brushed hers, a brief touch that made her heart stutter. "Coffee," she said, forcing a smile. "Not much, but it's warm." Cole nodded. "Best kind there is." He sipped in silence, staring into the fire like it held some ghost he couldn't face. His expression carried that same weight Cassie had noticed the night before, a mix of tiredness and sorrow that went deeper than hunger or cold. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Tommy's laugh echoed faintly from outside as he ran through puddles in his bare feet. "You got a fine boy," Cole murmured. "Got some spirit." Cassie's lips softened into a proud smile. "He's all I got left of my husband. He helps more than a boy his age should." Cole gave a slow nod, his jaw tight. "That's how it goes sometimes. Life don't always give a fair share." There was something in his tone, something bitter. Cassie turned to him carefully. "You sound like a man who knows that firsthand." He didn't answer right away. The fire popped between them. Finally he said, "I worked a ranch once. Down near Laramie. My pa owned it, for he died. Me and my brother ran it for a while." "What happened?" Cole stared down at his coffee, his fingers tightening around the cup. "He was younger than me. Reckless but good-hearted. Always wanted to prove himself. One day he tried to round up a herd by himself. Lightnin' spooked the cattle. Stampede hit fast. I got there too late." His voice cracked just enough for Cassie to notice. "I buried him myself," Cole continued. "Folks said it wasn't my fault, but it was. I should have been there. Instead, I was drinking in town." Cassie's breath caught. She could see the pain behind his rough exterior now, grief that had hardened into anger, guilt that had turned into solitude. "That's why you left?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. "Couldn't stand to look at the place no more. Sold what was left, took to riding alone. Been that way near 4 years." Silence fell between them again. The only sound was the soft hiss of the fire and the faint giggle of children outside. Cassie finally said, "You're not the only one who's lost someone, Cole." He looked up. "My husband was a kind man," she went on. "Good, honest. Went out to fetch water one morning and never came back. The horse came home without him. They said he fell, maybe broke his neck. But I never saw the body. Just gone." Cole's gaze softened. "That's a hard way to live, not knowing that." "It is," Cassie said quietly. "But I have to. For them." She nodded toward the window where Tommy was now showing Annie how to splash in the puddles. For the first time Cole's mouth twitched, something close to a smile. "You doing fine," he said. "He'd be proud of you." Cassie's eyes shimmered. "And your brother? What would he think of the man you've become?" That made Cole look away again, jaw clenching. "He'd say I got mean. And he'd be right. World's got a way of doing that to a man." Cassie studied him a moment longer. Beneath the scars, the scruff, and the silence, she saw something most folks in Dustwater never had. A man who wasn't mean at all, just broken in ways the world had forgotten how to mend. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. Cole stood, pulling on his gloves. "Storm's past. I best get moving." Cassie walked him to the door. "Where will you go?" He shrugged. "Don't rightly know. Maybe south, maybe nowhere." She wanted to say stay, but the words caught in her throat. "Thank you for the fire," he said quietly, tipping his hat. "Thank you for fixing the woodpile," she replied, her voice barely steady. As he stepped outside, Tommy ran up, holding something in his hand. "Mr. Cole, you forgot your coffee cup." Cole chuckled softly. "You keep it, kid. Maybe you'll remember me next time it storms." He mounted his horse, rain dripping off the brim of his hat, and with one last look at Cassie, half longing, half goodbye, he rode off into the open plains. Cassie stood at the doorway long after he vanished into the horizon. Something about that man stayed with her. The sadness in his eyes, the gentleness in his hands, the way his voice had softened when he spoke of her children. For the first time in a long while, Cassie Mayfield felt something she hadn't dared feel since her husband's death. Oh. It had been 3 weeks since the storm, and the plains of Dustwater had gone from muddy brown to sunburnt gold again. Cassie Mayfield's little cabin stood sturdy against the horizon, smoke curling from its chimney, the sound of children's laughter spilling through the window. And sometimes, every few days, always around noon, the sound of hoofbeats would echo down the dirt road. That was when Cole Hardin would ride in. He never stayed long. Sometimes he dropped off a sack of flour from town. Other days he chopped wood, fixed a fence post, or checked the roof where the shingles had loosened. He never asked for food, money, or thanks. He just worked and left. But Dustwater was a small town, and small towns had long memories and sharp tongues. The saloon gossip. At the Dry Gulch Saloon, word spread like wildfire. "You seen that drifter hangin' round Cassie Mayfield's place again?" a ranch hand named Earl Timmons said, setting his whiskey glass down with a smirk. "Sure have," another man replied. "Meanest cowboy this side of the Red River. Folks say he killed a man in Abilene. Now he's keepin' company with a widow and her young uns." "Ain't proper," said the bartender, polishing a glass with slow judgment. Sheriff Vance Crowe, leaning back in his chair nearby, listened with a thin smile. "Cassie's a pretty woman. She don't need no broken-down outlaw darkenin' her doorstep." Earl grinned. "You sweet on her, Sheriff?" The sheriff's smile faded. "Just makin' sure decent women stay decent." At the cabin. Back at the Mayfield place, Cassie was pulling laundry from the line when she heard the familiar sound of hooves. Tommy ran to the gate. "Mama. Mr. Cole's here again." Cassie wiped her hands on her apron and looked up. Cole rode in slow, hat low against the sun, leading his horse with one hand and carrying a broken wagon wheel with the other. "Found this on the trail," he said, nodding toward her small wagon. "Figured it was yours." Cassie smiled shyly. "You're observant, Mr. Hardin." He shrugged. "Ain't much else to do when you ride alone." As he fixed the wheel, Tommy sat nearby carving a stick, watching his every move with awe. "Mr. Cole, were you really a cowboy?" Cole chuckled. "Still am, I reckon. Just don't have a herd to prove it." Cassie watched from the porch, her arms folded. Tommy let the man work. But Cole shook his head. "He's fine, ma'am. Boy's got good hands. Could make a ranch hand out of him yet." That made Tommy grin from ear to ear. Cassie tried to hide her smile, but inside, something fluttered. It had been so long since she'd seen a man talk kindly to her boy or laugh like that. Whispers turned cruel. By the next week, the whispers had turned crueler. Cassie heard them first at the general store. "Looks like the widow Mayfield's talking in strays," one woman snickered as Cassie passed the shelf of canned beans. Another whispered loud enough to be heard, "Can't say I blame her. Loneliness'll make a woman forget her good sense." Cassie's hands trembled as she placed her items on the counter. She didn't look up, just paid for her things and left, holding her head high until she reached the outside, and then the tears came. She didn't see the sheriff watching her from across the street, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. The confrontation. That evening, Cole returned with a sack of cornmeal and nails. He found Cassie sitting on the porch steps, eyes red, her children already asleep inside. "You all right?" he asked. Cassie looked up at him, her face strong but her voice small. "They're talking about me in town, Cole?" "About us." Cole frowned, his jaw tightening. "Ain't nothing to talk about. Folks just got nothing better to do." She shook her head. "It's not just talk. The sheriff came by. Said it wasn't decent for a man like you to be comin' around." Cole's voice dropped. "What kind of man does he think I am?" "The kind who scares people," Cassie whispered. "The kind who's had trouble following him." He took a long breath, staring out toward the dark horizon. "They ain't wrong, Cassie. Trouble's followed me most my life. But not here. Not around you." Cassie looked down at her hands. "I know you mean well, Cole. But I've got to think about my children. I can't afford to have the town tinnin' against me." Cole's eyes softened. "And what about you? Who's looking out for you?" Cassie's breath caught. He stepped closer but kept his distance, his voice low and steady. "I ain't a skin for nothin'. Just to help where I can. Then I'll ride on when you tell me to." The way he said it, quiet, honest, cut right through her fear. She looked up at him, and for a moment she saw not the drifter everyone warned her about, but a man trying to find a place to belong. "All right," she said softly. "You can stay for supper." Cole's eyes met hers for a brief, aching second before he nodded. Much obliged, ma'am. The gentle evening. The firelight that night was softer than usual. Cassie ladled stew into 3 bowls, one for herself, one for Cole, and one for Tommy, who insisted on staying up just a little longer. Cole told quiet stories about life on the trail, dust storms, wild horses, long nights under the stars. Tommy listened wide-eyed, his spoon forgotten in his hand. Cassie watched the two of them, her son laughing, the stranger smiling faintly, and something inside her began to shift. For the first time since her husband's death, she didn't feel completely alone. But deep down, she knew peace like that never lasted long in dust water. Foreshadowing. Later that night, after Cole left, Cassie stood by the window, watching his silhouette fade into the darkness. A whisper of wind brushed against the pane, carrying the echo of what she'd heard in town earlier that day. Mean men don't change. But her heart argued otherwise. Because the man she'd seen tonight, the one who fixed fences and made her boy laugh, wasn't mean at all. He was wounded, lonely, searching. And though she'd promised herself never to open her heart again, something told her it was already too late. The sun had barely risen over dust water when the trouble began to brew. The air was hot, the kind that made tempers short and tongues sharper than barbed wire. Cassie Mayfield was hauling water from the well when she heard hooves approach from behind. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, the kind of gait that made a woman's heart tighten because it meant authority was coming. She turned, wiping her brow, and there he was, Sheriff Vance Crowe, his silver badge gleaming bright in the morning sun. He was tall, clean-shaven, and too smooth for a man who carried a gun. "Mornin', Miss Mayfield," he said, tipping his hat. His tone carried the false politeness of a man who liked being listened to. Cassie nodded, guarded. "Mornin', Sheriff." He looked around her homestead, his gaze lingering on the neat rows of corn, the freshly mended fence, the pile of chopped wood stacked by the barn. "You've been keepin' busy," he said. Cassie's jaw tightened. "Had some help." "Ah." Crowe's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The drifter again?" Cassie didn't answer. "Cole Hardin," the sheriff said, rolling the name around like a bad taste. "Mean sort of fella. You'd best be careful, Cassie. Man like that don't just show up to fix fences." Cassie set down the bucket, her patience thinning. "Mr. Hardin's done nothing wrong. He's been kind to me and my children." Crowe dismounted his horse, dusting off his gloves. "That may be so, but dust water don't look kindly on a widow keepin' company with a man like him. You've got a reputation to think about." Cassie's eyes flashed. "My reputation don't feed my children, Sheriff. His help does." He stepped closer, voice dropping low. "You know I've always tried to look out for you, Cassie. You don't need the likes of him. You need someone respectable." Cassie's stomach turned. She could smell the whiskey on his breath, faint but there. "I appreciate your concern," she said firmly, "but I can take care of myself." Crowe's smile vanished. He studied her for a long moment, his jaw working. "Just remember," he said finally, "folks in town watch everything. A woman's name don't take long to spoil." He tugged his reins, mounted up, and rode off, dust rising in his wake. Cassie stood there long after he'd gone, her hands trembling. The town's poison words. Later that day, Cassie went into town for sugar and lamp oil. The moment she stepped into the general store, conversation dipped. 2 women by the flour barrel stopped talking and turned their backs. She could feel the weight of their stares even as she walked down the aisle. When she reached the counter, old Mrs. Barlow, who usually greeted her with a smile, barely looked up. "Sugar's gone up 2 cents, the woman muttered flatly. Cassie handed over the coins without argument. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you, ma'am." As she turned to leave, one of the women whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Heard the drifter's been stayin' nights out there." "Don't surprise me none," the other replied. "Lonely women do foolish things." Cassie stopped in her tracks, the words cutting deeper than they should have. She turned, eyes glinting. "For your information, Mr. Hardin's done more for my children than half this town ever did." Gasps rippled through the room, but Cassie didn't wait for their response. She lifted her chin and walked out the door. Outside, the summer heat hit her full in the face, but the sting of shame burned hotter. The evening visit. That evening, Cole arrived as usual, carrying a sack of oats over one shoulder. His shirt clung to him from the ride, dust caked at his boots. He saw Cassie sitting on the porch, her expression distant. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "You ever get tired of people talking about you, Cole?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Ma'am, if I started caring what folks said, I'd never leave my horse." She sighed, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. It's different for me. I got kids. A home. People don't think twice before they ruin a woman's name. Cole leaned against the porch rail, his eyes steady on hers. If my comin' round's bringin' you trouble, I can stop. Her heart twisted at the thought. That's not what I meant. He nodded slowly. I ain't much for crowds or town talk. But I don't like seein' you hurt on my account. Cassie looked up at him, her eyes tired but full of something softer, something she was afraid to name. You didn't hurt me, Cole. They did. For a moment, the air between them thickened with unspoken words. He cleared his throat and said gently, I'll mend that barn door you said was stickin'. Then I'll get gone before sundown. She watched him work for hours, the muscles in his arms flexing with each swing of the hammer. When the job was done, he wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to leave. Cole, she called out before he reached his horse. He stopped, hat in hand. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once. Ain't nothin'. But she could see in his eyes that it meant something, to both of them. The sheriff's warning. Just as Cole was about to mount his horse, a shadow appeared at the gate. Sheriff Crow. Evening light hit the badge on his chest, making it gleam like a warning. Didn't expect to find you here again, Hardin, he said, his tone edged with mockery. Cole turned slowly, calm but cold. I was fixin' her barn. Nothin' more. The sheriff dismounted and walked closer. That's what you call it, huh? Folks say you been fixin' more than that. Cole's eyes darkened. You best watch your words, Sheriff. Cassie stepped between them. That's enough, both of you. Crow ignored her, his smirk turning cruel. You're a drifter, Hardin. You'll move on soon enough. But this woman's got to live here when you're gone. You keep comin' round, you'll ruin her. Cole's fists clenched but his voice stayed low. Ain't your business who I help. Crow's smile vanished. It's my business to keep order. You want trouble, I can oblige. Vance? Cassie's voice cracked, trembling with anger. You get off my land. The sheriff glared at her, then at Cole, before finally turning his horse around. Don't say I didn't warn you, he muttered, riding off into the dark. A quiet firelight. When the dust settled, Cassie sank to the porch steps, shaking. Cole stood there a moment, hat in hand. I didn't mean to bring this on you, he said softly. She looked up at him, eyes wet but steady. You didn't? The sheriff's just a man who don't like what he can't have. Cole's brows furrowed, but he said nothing. They sat there a long time in silence, the crickets singing and the firelight from inside casting a soft glow over them both. Finally Cassie whispered, Please don't come inside tonight, Cole. If folks saw the lamp on this late, they'd start talking again. He nodded, understanding. I'll sleep out by the barn. Safer that way. As he walked away, she whispered to herself, Not safer for my heart. End of the day. Cassie watched from the window as he laid his coat down in the hay, his silhouette strong against the lantern light. She didn't know what frightened her more. The town's cruel mouths, or the quiet, growing warmth she felt every time that lonely cowboy came around. The night he came back. The moon hung low over Dustwater, pale as a ghost's lantern. The wind was still that night, too still as if even the coyotes were holding their breath. Cassie Mayfield sat by the window, the oil lamp dimmed to a soft flicker. Tommy slept soundly in the next room, his small hand curled around his wooden toy horse. But Cassie couldn't sleep. Not after what happened that morning. The sheriff had come again. The sheriff's warning. He'd shown up at the cabin unannounced, his horse kicking up dust as it stopped by her porch. Evenin', Cassie, Sheriff Crow had said, tipping his hat with false politeness. Heard Cole Hardin's been hangin' around here again. Cassie folded her arms, keeping her voice steady. He's done nothing wrong. Maybe not yet, Crow replied, stepping closer. But trouble follows that man like flies on a carcass. He's poison, and if you ain't careful, he'll drag you down too. Cassie stiffened. He's helped me, Sheriff. He's been kind. The sheriff's smile was thin as a knife. Kindness don't change a man's past. Folks talking bad about you already. You got a son to think of. Cassie's jaw trembled, but she stood firm. If the town wants to gossip, let them. I won't turn away someone good out of fear. Crow's eyes narrowed. You don't know him like I do, Miss Mayfield. He's got blood on his hands. And then, before she could speak, he'd leaned in close, his voice low and cold. And when he leaves you crying in the dirt, don't say I didn't warn you. He rode off, leaving her heart thundering in her chest and her faith trembling. A knock in the dark. Now, as Cassie sat staring into the shadows, the clock ticked past midnight. A storm had gathered on the horizon, dark clouds rolling in like a herd of buffalo. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound jolted her upright. She froze, her breath shallow. Another knock. Harder this time. She stood, hands trembling as she moved toward the door. "Who's there?" she called softly. "It's me," came Cole's deep voice through the rain. I didn't have nowhere else to go." Cassie hesitated. The words of the sheriff echoed in her mind, "He'll drag you down too." But the tone in Cole's voice wasn't dangerous, it was desperate. She lifted the latch and opened the door just enough to see him. He was drenched, mud streaking his face, a cut bleeding near his temple. "Lord Cole," she gasped. "What happened to you?" He staggered slightly, holding his ribs. "Got jumped outside the saloon. Sheriff's boys, I reckon. Said I didn't belong here." Cassie's eyes widened. "You're hurt, come in." Cole shook his head. "No, Cassie. I can't. The town's already talking. I won't bring no more shame to your door." "Don't be ridiculous," she said fiercely, reaching for his arm. "You'll bleed to death out there." He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face, soft, worried, beautiful in the lamplight. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Please don't come outside, Cassie. Not for me." But she ignored him and pulled the door wide open. "You're coming inside whether you like it or not." The small light. Cassie helped him sit by the hearth, her hands working quick and gentle as she cleaned his wound. Cole winced but said nothing. "You shouldn't have fought them," she scolded softly. "You know how they are." Cole's eyes met hers. "Didn't fight back much. They just wanted to remind me I ain't welcome. Figured I'd take my leave come morning." She froze mid-motion. "You're leaving?" He nodded, gaze low. "Ain't right for me to keep bringing you trouble." Cassie's throat tightened. "And what about me? You think you can just walk away after everything?" He looked up, startled. "Cassie." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "You helped me. You helped my son. You made this house feel alive again. And you think I'd rather go back to silence and fear?" Cole swallowed hard. "I'm no good for you, Cassie. You know it." She shook her head. "That's what you think. But you don't see what I see." There was a long pause. Only the crackle of the fire and the pounding rain filled the silence. "What do you see?" he asked quietly. "I see a man trying to make peace with his past," she said. "A man who's kind even when the world's been cruel to him." Cole's jaw clenched, his eyes glistening with something he hadn't let himself feel in years. "I don't deserve that," he whispered. "Maybe not," Cassie said softly. "But maybe you need it." The heart softens. Cole leaned back, the pain easing under her gentle touch. The warmth of the fire painted gold over her face. For the first time, Cassie noticed how tired he looked, not just from the fight but from years of running from ghosts no one else could see. "Cole," she said quietly, "stay. At least till you heal." He hesitated. "And if the sheriff comes?" "Then he'll have to talk to me," she said, standing taller. "I've been scared long enough." Their eyes met, two broken souls, each finding something whole in the other. He nodded slowly. "All right. Just for a little while." Cassie smiled faintly, her heart both heavy and light. "Just for a little while," she repeated. A storm and a promise. The storm broke fully outside, wind howling, rain lashing the window panes. But inside, the small cabin glowed with warmth. Cassie handed him a blanket. He took it, his fingers brushing hers, a fleeting touch, yet it burned through both of them like a spark. "Thank you," he murmured. She turned toward the fire, hiding her face. "You're welcome." As the night deepened, the rain drowned out the world beyond. For the first time, Cassie didn't feel afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Because tonight, the mean and lonely cowboy wasn't a stranger anymore. He was home. 3 days passed since the storm, and Dustwater was buzzing with fresh gossip. By sunrise, the whole town already knew. Cole Hardin had spent the night in Cassie Mayfield's house. It didn't matter that he'd been hurt, or that she'd simply tended his wounds. In Dustwater, truth had never mattered much, only whispers. Whispers at the church. Sunday morning came with the chime of the old church bell. Cassie walked up the dirt road, her hand resting protectively on Tommy's shoulder. Her bonnet hid most of her face, but she could feel the stares. "They say she took him in," a woman whispered near the steps. "In her house all night. With her boy there too. Shameful." Cassie kept walking, eyes down, her jaw tight. She had come to worship, not to defend herself, but the weight of judgment pressed on her shoulders like a stone. Inside, she took her seat near the back. But even there she could hear the murmurs. When the preacher began his sermon about temptation and the appearance of sin, She felt the message aimed straight at her pew. Her fingers trembled in her lap. Tommy looked up at her, confused. "Mama, why's everyone looking at us?" he whispered. Cassie forced a smile. "Don't mind them, sweetheart. Just listen to the preacher." But her heart was breaking quietly. The sheriff's visit. That afternoon she heard horses again, too many this time. Cole stepped out of the barn, still sore but standing tall as Sheriff Crow and 2 deputies rode up. Crow dismounted, dusting off his coat, his voice calm but dripping with authority. "Afternoon, Hardin." "Ma'am." Cassie crossed her arms. "What do you want, Sheriff?" Crow's gaze shifted from her to Cole. "Just paying a friendly visit. Heard the drifter's been making himself at home." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You come here to run me off again?" Crow smirked. "That depends. Are you fixin' to stay?" Cassie stepped between them. "Sheriff, you've no right to speak to him like that." Crow raised a brow. "Oh, I've got every right. This town's got laws, Miss Mayfield. Laws about decent women keepin' decent company. You think I'm gonna sit by while you ruin your good name, and that boy's future, for a man like him?" Cassie's voice trembled with anger. "He's done nothing but help me." "Help?" Crow's tone turned cruel. "Is that what you call it when he sneaks in after dark?" Whole town saw his horse out front that night. Cole's hands balled into fists. "Careful, Sheriff." Crow turned his sharp smile on him. "Or what, Hardin? You'll kill me too, like the man back in Abilene?" Cassie froze, her eyes darting to Cole. "Cole, what's he talking about?" Cole's jaw flexed. "That's between me and my past." Crow chuckled darkly. "Tell her, Hardin. Tell her how you shot a man dead over a poker game." Cole's voice dropped low, steady. "I killed a man to stop him from shooting a woman. But you'd twist that into whatever suits you, wouldn't you?" Crow stepped closer. "This is your last warning. You leave Dustwater by sundown. If I find you here again, I'll drag you out myself." Cole met his gaze without flinching. "And if I don't?" Crow leaned in, voice icy. "Then you'll rot in a cell, or worse." Between fear and faith. After the sheriff left, Cassie stood on the porch, her heart pounding. The silence between her and Cole felt heavier than the clouds above them. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "About Abilene?" He looked away. "Every word of it. I did what I had to. But ever since, folks been calling me a killer." Cassie swallowed. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have changed how you see me?" he asked, voice breaking a little. She hesitated. "No. But it would have changed how I worry." Cole exhaled hard, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't come here looking for forgiveness, Cassie. Just a chance to live quiet for once." She stepped closer. "You don't need to prove anything to this town, Cole. Not to them, not even to me." He looked at her then, eyes full of the ache he'd carried for years. "You deserve better than a man with a past." Cassie shook her head. "We all got a past. What matters is what you do now." But the sound of approaching hooves cut their moment short. The town's breaking point. By evening, half the town had gathered near her property line. Men from the saloon, women from the church, all standing in grim silence. Sheriff Crow rode to the front, calling out, "Cassie Mayfield, step outside." Cassie did, holding Tommy's hand tightly. "We ain't here to hurt nobody," Crow said. "But we can't let a killer hole up here. This town don't want him." Cassie's voice rang out clear. "You mean you don't want him?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Crow turned to the people. "Y'all know me. I've kept this town clean for 10 years. I won't let one drifter ruin it." Then he looked back at Cassie. "You can keep your home, Cassie. But he goes. Tonight." Cassie's heart raced. Cole stood behind her, silent, his hand resting on his gun belt, but she could tell he didn't want bloodshed. She looked at the crowd, then at the sheriff, then at Cole. Finally, she said, voice shaking, "If he leaves, I leave too." The words hit the crowd like thunder. Crow's face darkened. "You don't mean that." "I do," Cassie said. "He's done more for me and my boy than this whole town ever did. You call him mean, you call him dangerous, but I call him good." Gasps spread among the townsfolk. Crow's jaw tightened. "Then you're a fool, Cassie Mayfield." "Maybe," she said, lifting her chin. "But I'd rather be a fool who sees the truth than a coward who believes lies." The sheriff stared at her for a long, cold second. Then he spat in the dust, turned his horse and rode away. The crowd followed, some whispering, others shaking their heads. Cassie turned to Cole, her whole body trembling. "I meant what I said," she whispered. Cole's eyes softened. "You shouldn't have to fight my battles." She reached up, touching his cheek. "Maybe I'm not fightin' for you, Cole. Maybe I'm fightin' for what's right. The promise beneath the stars. That night, Dustwater went quiet again. Cassie sat on the porch beside Cole, Tommy asleep inside. The stars shone faintly through the drifting clouds. You could still go, she said softly. If you think it'll make things easier. Cole shook his head. If I go they'll think they won. And you'll still be here facing them alone. Cassie smiled faintly. Guess that means you're stayin'. He looked at her then, something fierce and tender in his eyes. Guess it does. The night breeze brushed between them, cool and gentle, carrying the faint scent of rain and dust. And for the first time neither of them felt alone. Please don't come inside. The wind howled across Dustwater that night, carrying with it the scent of rain and gunpowder. The town had gone to sleep uneasy, half ashamed of its cruelty, half waiting for the next storm. Inside the small Mayfield cabin the fire burned low. Cassie sat by the window, sewing by lantern light while Tommy slept peacefully in the loft. Cole sat nearby, whittling a piece of pine. His face was calmer now, but his eyes, they never rested. He knew peace in Dustwater was like morning frost. It never lasted long. The quiet before. Cole, Cassie said softly, breaking the silence, do you ever think about leaving for good? Just starting over somewhere nobody knows you? He nodded slowly. Used to. But there's always some sheriff, some rumor, some shadow following close behind. A man like me don't outrun his past, he just learns to carry it quieter. She set her sewing down, her voice trembling. You could stay here. For good. Dustwater will come around, eventually. Cole smiled sadly. Maybe. But folks like Sheriff Crow don't forget easy. The sound of thunder rolled in the distance. Cassie glanced at the window, then froze. 3 riders were coming down the trail. Torches in hand. Her heart stuttered. Cole, she whispered, someone's coming? He stood, eyes sharp. Get Tommy upstairs. Now. The sheriff returns. Within minutes, hooves stomped outside, boots hit dirt, and the knock came hard, furious. Bang. 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 Cassie Mayfield. Sheriff Crow's voice thundered through the storm. Open up. Cassie's breath caught. Cole motioned for her to stay back. Crow's voice came again, rougher. You had your chance. You defied the law, and now you're harboring a fugitive. Open that door or I'll break it down. Cassie's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. Cole looked at her, eyes calm but resolute. This is my fight, Cassie, he said quietly. Don't open that door. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. If they take you, they'll kill you. He stepped closer, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. Better me than you and that boy. You've given me more than I ever deserved. Her voice broke. Please, Cole, don't go out there. He smiled faintly, that half-sad, half-brave smile she'd come to love. Then don't open the door. Gunfire in the rain. The next knock wasn't a knock at all. It was a kick, the wood splintered and the latch cracked. Cole grabbed his gun, swinging the door open himself. Rain poured in, soaking the floorboards. Lightning flashed, illuminating Sheriff Crow and his men, rifles raised. Step aside, Hardin, Crow barked. You're under arrest. Cole stood tall, rain dripping from his hat brim. For what? Being unwanted. Crow sneered. For murder. For stirring up trouble. For thinking you could ever belong here. Cole's voice was quiet but firm. You're scared, Crow. Scared, 'cause you see yourself in me. Crow's eyes narrowed. Don't test me. I ain't, Cole said. But I'll defend what's mine. He raised his gun, not to aim but to warn. The sheriff's deputy panicked, firing a shot into the rain. Crack. The bullet grazed Cole's shoulder. Cassie screamed from inside. Cole fired back, not at the men but at the ground near their boots. Enough. The storm swallowed the sound, thunder rolling like war drums. Crow raised his gun again, eyes wild. Please don't come inside. Cassie burst through the doorway, rain pelting her bonnet. Stop it. All of you. Crow froze. Cassie, get back inside. She stood firm between them. This ends tonight. Cole's voice roared above the thunder. Cassie, please, don't come outside. But she didn't move. I won't hide anymore. Crow's face twisted. You defending him now? I'm defending truth, she cried. You call him a killer, but you're the one ready to murder a man in the dark. Crow hesitated, his men glancing uncertainly at one another. Cassie stepped closer to him, eyes blazing. I won't open my door to hate, Sheriff. Not again. You'll have to kill me first. For a moment, the rain itself seemed to stop. Then Crow lowered his gun. He looked at her, then at Cole, disgust in his eyes, but something else too. Shame. Fine, he spat. You want him? Keep him. But don't expect this town to forgive you. He turned, mounting his horse. Come on, boys. Within seconds they were gone, swallowed by the night. The morning after. The rain stopped near dawn. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Cassie sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the sun climb over the hills. Cole stepped outside, his arm bandaged, his face pale but alive. They'll never leave us alone now, she said quietly. He nodded. Then we'll go someplace they can't find us. Maybe north. Fresh land, quiet skies. She looked up at him. You'd really leave Dustwater for me? He smiled gently. Cassie, I'd leave the whole world for you. She stood and took his hand, her eyes shining in the sunrise. Then let's start over. Together. Cole squeezed her hand. Together. Weeks later, the cabin stood empty, save for a single letter nailed to the door. To whoever comes looking for us, we ain't gone far, just far enough to breathe again. Some folks only learn love when it's too late. We didn't want to be those folks. Cassie Mayfield and Cole Hardin. The people of Dustwater whispered about them for years afterward. Some said they married up north. Others swore they saw them riding the plains side by side. But one thing everyone agreed on. That night, when the storm came and the sheriff brought his hate, Cassie Mayfield didn't hide behind her door. She opened it, to love.